It's Dina and Melba Pearson and Legal AF. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the free subscribe. We are breaking down some very important news for our democracy out of North Carolina. North Carolina seems to be where it's at in terms of voter rights and voter suppression. Republicans see North Carolina as a must-win state, both for the Senate, the House, and the presidential elections. It's become more and more of a swing state. As we know, they have a Democratic governor. Republicans have had a very hard time winning the governor there, and the presidential election has gotten closer and closer. So make no mistake, this is why they are bringing the voter suppression to North Carolina. We saw it with the Supreme Court race. In particular, we saw the Republican backed by the RNC trying to purge about 60,000 voters in order to take away the victory of the Democrat Supreme Court justice. The state Supreme Court justices are elected in North Carolina. They used to be appointed, and that was one of the things that was reversed by the Republican legislature there years ago. So they are partisan. Supreme Court, they're elected by party. Jefferson Griffin was the Republican candidate who lost. Now we are seeing the Department of Justice sue in North Carolina. They are suing basically, they're saying that there is a violation of the Help America Vote Act. Now, Melba, you and I have spoken before about what's happening at the DOJ Civil Rights Division, because the Civil Rights Division, we saw mass exodus of lawyers when Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi decided to remake the division from "we are protecting people's civil rights, we are protecting people's right to vote," to attacking people's civil rights and taking away people's right to vote. We saw many lawyers leaving as a result of this. And they have this is not just something we are, opining about. They have said that their new mission is rooting out fraud, right? They have said that this is their mission. Of course, we know that there is no rampant fraud in our election systems. Our election systems are not run federally. They're run county by county. They are overseen by the Democrats. They're overseen by Republican groups. They're overseen by their own, county officials. And sometimes there are people who vote when they're not supposed to vote. And that gets usually rooted out, sometimes criminally prosecuted. Nothing like rampant fraud. So the DOJ, RNC lost their bid to take over the state Supreme Court, are now suing in order to try to basically attack essentially those same voters that the Jefferson Griffin was trying to throw out. And this is just the beginning. A lawsuit has just been filed. We have not yet seen the rebuttal filing, but this is their next attempt, really, for voter suppression. If you live in North Carolina, they are coming after your right to vote.
They're coming after all your rights. But right now, we're going to talk about the right to vote. And so what's kind of crazy about this is, so in this act basically says that when you register to vote, you've either got to give your driver's license number or the last four of your social. And so there was a group of folks who were already registered to vote who came before that law was enacted. So they didn't give their social security number, last four of their social, or their driver's license number. So now basically the assertion is those folks should be purged from the rolls. But at the time that all of this was brought up during the last election in 2024, basically they were like, yeah, we see that this could be a problem. However, it is too close to the general election to go back now, try to reach all these people and say, hey, you got to give us this information or we're going to purge you off the rolls, right? Because you got to give people an opportunity to fix it in time for an election, not just, oh yeah, now you can't vote because now you're disenfranchising people. So it seems like they were trying to figure out a way to work this out in the aftermath of this. So this lawsuit to me seems more like theater than actually addressing an issue, because again, the counties and a lot of the folks involved in this scenario have expressed willingness to figure out a way forward. But now he's like, oh yeah, this is a whole fraud. Meanwhile, this is a state he won. Let's not get it twisted. He won North Carolina. So this is obviously something to throw a bone to the local, North Carolina Republican Party and the local parties, because again, he won, so he's fine. And knowing him, he really doesn't care as long as he gets what he wants. But obviously, he's worried about midterm elections. He's worried that maybe the North Carolina representatives or senators that are maybe on the ballot may not be in a strong position. So he's hoping that if he disenfranchises a whole bunch of people, that will retain control or help retain control of the House and Senate. Don't know. But again, when you think about people registering to vote and all of that, there are a ton of people in the US. I mean, there are millions of people in the US that don't have a driver's license. Or they may not have government issued photo ID in that manner, because, you may not drive. So why did you get a driver's license if you don't drive, right? So obviously, if you don't drive, that's not something that you're going to be able to provide. Social Security, okay, anybody here legally pretty much should have a Social Security. But again, I don't think it roots out the issue of, is there fraud? And much to your point, Dina, there's only a handful of voter fraud cases that we've seen. And usually it's somebody voting twice because they live in one state and happen to have a summer house in another state. And then they ended up voting once in their home state and once in their vacation state or whatever, things like that. You're not really seeing the level of fraud, like, people who aren't citizens are voting and all of this. It's just, I guess, another way of saying it is red meat for the base. It's, as per usual, a manufactured crisis.
And it's pretext. And, like I said, we're just in the beginning of this lawsuit. So we kind of have to track it, and we will. So make sure and free subscribe so you get our updates. We will track it as it goes along. But they are also in North Carolina. They switched kind of control of the board of electors from the governor, because the governor is Democrat, to the auditor, of North Carolina, which you wouldn't think an auditor would have any say, that's not a role for elections, but they just did that because that was the one position that is Republican that they kind of could find. So they are just fired, actually, the Democrats. He fired the Democrats on this board of electors. The board of electors was the body who stepped in when Jefferson Griffin was trying to throw away those votes and contested it, because that's their job, right? Is to protect their election. They're the ones who oversee the elections. They're the ones who step in and either, defend it because they've certified it, right? They say that it's valid. So now you don't even know if they're going now. So there's this fight. This is, and where's legacy media on this, Melba? I mean, the crickets, just in these few minutes, we've talked about multiple ways that the RNC is attacking democracy in North Carolina. And we're not hearing this at all. And the fact that the lawsuit we're talking about is coming from the Department of Justice and not the RNC shows how much Trump is co-opting the Department of Justice. He's using our taxpayer money for his pet projects, right? And that's the thing that even if we're not in North Carolina, we should all have a say on. Spread the message to your neighbors. People who don't like their taxes going to this and that. Do you really want your taxes being used, as this pretext? If the RNC has a problem, they can sue, right? I mean, the fact is,
you don't need the Department of Injustice's help, because it's the Department of Injustice. It's no longer the Department of Justice. Exactly. But they don't need it. They can handle it on their own. I agree.
Exactly. And the reason why Jefferson Griffin lost his bid was because there was no merit to it, right? And here's the thing is, I've done voter protection work, right, for the Democratic Party. I've, volunteered in different elections, and I can't tell you how much oversight there is on our elections. Like, from Republicans and Democrats. I was a poll observer, even just this last election. There was Democrat poll observers, there were Republican poll observers, and we were sitting there watching who didn't get a chance to vote. Did they get a provisional ballot? Follow up with the people with a provisional ballot. I mean, we are talking about parties watching each and every vote. It's not happening in those states that are like very red and very blue, but in all those contested states, there are so many eyes on it. I also actually did voter protection work in North Carolina in 2020. And there was a lawsuit about during the pandemic about mail-in ballots. And there was a ruling that said basically don't count these ballots for now. And I called each of the counties, what are you doing with the ballots? And, they were like, we have 7 that are an issue. We have them on their tracker. We have them in the safe deposit box. People who are, I would say to anybody who's worried about the integrity of elections, volunteer. You see the levels of safeguards are numerous. And we should always be watching, right? It's always okay to have eyes. It's more than okay to have eyes and to have ears. But when you use the Department of Justice to voter suppression instead of integrity, this is a problem. And it's even more of a problem when the news isn't paying attention. Any last words, Melba?
Not only volunteer, but also run for office. Because if you run for office, you also are keeping a very close eye on what's happening in terms of electors and poll workers and what's happening at the different precincts in your area. I ran for office and I got a whole education in terms of, would you like to observe the account? Which, there's a lot of, again, provisions that are nonpartisan and also partisan as well. Dems, Republicans, overseeing a particular election, overseeing a recount, things like that. So voter fraud doesn't happen just like that. And I just want to be clear, this is manufactured drama. This is not really an issue.
Well, we will keep you updated on this lawsuit. Lots happening in North Carolina. It's kind of like, I think, their experimental location, perhaps. Yeah. If it works there, they're going to take it elsewhere. Dina Dahl, Melba Pearson, free subscribe so you get our updates.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.